AI adoption inside organizations is often framed as a structured process with rigid rules. The reality is that successful AI implementation requires both systems thinking and freedom to experiment. At the same time, AI is shifting the workforce from deep specialization to a new era of hypergeneralists, where adaptability and asking the right questions matter as much as having deep domain expertise. To explore these shifts, I'm joined by Nicola Smith, Senior AI Programs Advisor at Southwest Airlines and a leader in AI strategy, customer experience, and business transformation. Nicola has worked across industries to help companies integrate AI into their workflows in practical, people-centered ways. Nicola, welcome to Just Curious.
Hi, thank you. Excited to be here.
As the Senior AI Programs Advisor at Southwest Airlines, what are you focused on?
We are really focused on looking at places where AI can provide tangible, measurable value back to the business. And we're also looking at places where AI can remove friction for both employees and our customers.
Awesome. And you've said that AI adoption requires both structured systems thinking and also individual experimentation. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, AI is very different than other technologies that we have implemented within large and small organizations. It is an interconnected technology, and I think eventually we will talk about AI the way that we do the internet. There will be an assumption of AI integration and AI-powered capabilities across many of our tools and systems that we have in place today. So implementing AI, especially at the enterprise level, is really about understanding how those systems are connected and thinking about process change and really overall business transformation as it relates to those systems. But this technology is also a ground-up technology where we have to empower individuals to use it in the way that is most beneficial to them. And that's partially because the real power of AI is really as an additive or an enhancer of human capability. And that itself is individual.
Yeah.
So it enhances your strengths, and it can also kind of fill in for your gaps and the places where maybe you don't have as much knowledge or expertise. And that is very much at the individual level.
And what happens when companies over-rely on structured AI governance and they fail to give employees room to experiment?
So I think governance is very important. I think having guidelines, having a clear way that you want employees to be able to use these tools, I think is necessary, both to protect data within the enterprise as well as customer data, but also to make sure that we're being responsible with the way we're using those tools. This is such a new space that it's very easy for both organizations and individuals to make mistakes, not necessarily realizing the security implications of the actions that they're taking within these tools and systems. That being said, I think we've got to give people leeway, not necessarily from a pure governance standpoint, but in regards to use cases and where they want to be able to apply these tools. So in my mind, governance should be obviously the guardrails, but we shouldn't be dictating, you must use ChatGPT to write all of your emails from now on. Right? The use case, if I love writing, why should I be forced to use AI to write my emails? I hate spreadsheets. I would love it if AI could handle anything for me that's going to live in a spreadsheet. But that's at the individual level. So I think that's where the experimentation happens, is within those guardrails, but allowing for individual use cases and preferences.
Yeah. And how do you create that culture where AI experimentation's encouraged but still is aligned with business goals and managed according to the governance that you put in place?
So I think the business goals to me is really in large part connected to the systems piece. You know, AI can be used to do almost any task that we want it to. So being very, very clear on our overall business goals and being able to align strategy to those goals, to me, is what should be driving prioritization, investment, basically Are you investing in the things that are actually going to deliver against your goals? I think too often what we see in the space, especially for first movers and early adopters, is that many of the things they experimented with didn't necessarily drive business value. And then as a result, you maybe see leadership opting out of additional experimentation. So I think it actually helps us if we have a real use case for that experimentation and we can connect those dots to value. But part of that also becomes a question of how are we measuring the value that AI is bringing to the table? And I think right now, the primary metric most folks look at is efficiency. But that may not be the right metric in all cases. And I think that there's still a lot of discovery to do as the space matures.
Yeah, and I want to put a pin into use case identification because we're going to touch on that in a few minutes. And I do want to kind of deep dive into some of what you've spoken to about AI as an enabler of the hypergeneralist workforce. You said that AI is making it more important to ask the right questions than to be a deep domain expert. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, we're living in an era where through AI-powered tools and specifically new generative and agentic AI solutions, where all of the information of the human experience and everything that we've ever documented in writing is accessible, not just at your fingertips in the way that search put things at your fingertips in the kind of earlier web eras, but in a really natural language oriented way, and not just information and answers, but really personalized support and guidance and step-by-step help. If you want to go build something, you can now essentially have that expert standing over your shoulder, helping to guide your work. So we're moving into an age, and we're seeing this, right, in the workforce. The jobs most at risk in this new era are actually white collar jobs, right? Jobs in the intelligence and kind of information economy. And again, a lot of that is because we now have very quick access to this information with the additional context of expertise. We can ask it questions, we can verify information, we can validate our assumptions and hypotheses, we can ask for specific types of support. And so being able to ask the right questions, being able to communicate with these tools is going to become more important than necessarily having all of that information in your head. Right. And I'll give you an example that I used this week. So I have worked in product strategy, but I am not, on the side of the house where we're building requirements for products. I'm working on an initiative where we needed to start putting UX, UI requirements together for the dev team. And as we're figuring out some resourcing, I was able to very quickly use Claude to help me come up with a template for documenting requirements, to give me the fundamental requirements of any web-based experience, right? Like top navigation, home button, FAQs page, home screen, just some general stuff as a starting point to building out those requirements. It's gotten me probably 70% of the way there, right? There's some more work to do. I don't have to be a domain expert in how to put together product requirements. I just need to know enough to ask the right questions, to then validate that with people who maybe are experts, to get their input before we finalize that document.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy. I did something similar with the Just Curious website, where in putting together a design brief for designers and developers, putting together user stories and all the ingredients to helping inform how the site was architected and informing how it was ultimately designed and built, I was able to use Claude and ChatGPT to get 70, 80, 85% of the way there. Not a finished document, of course, but like get most of the way there and save would have taken me days, 2 years ago.
yeah.
It is really an amazing enabler. And so then how should businesses rethink hiring and training and job roles given that, it's about asking the right questions, it's about having this partner as an enabler and as leverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what folks should be hiring for is really looking for more T-shaped individuals, right? Those who have maybe had lots of different job experiences, have worked in different types of organizations, have touched different parts of the org. Being able to bring a kind of vast array of experience to the table when asking questions, when framing things, when putting together a prompt even is really valuable. I would also start to think about how you train folks more broadly on strategy, because a lot of these skills are really the same skills that we use in any type of strategy environment or strategic engagement. A lot of it is about understanding context. What is the information you want or need to know, or what's the output need to look like? A lot of it is really, I think, both strategy and in some ways leadership skills, right? One of the ways that especially in the earlier days that I was talking about generative AI is think of it as a really smart intern who wants to do great work, but they're going to need a certain amount of guidance so that they don't run off and put together a document that isn't actually relevant to what you need from them. And I've worked with interns where that's the case. You give them a task, but very little direction, you're going to get something back. Is it going to be what you need? Probably not, right? Same applies to these tools. Is we've got to understand the amount of information that we need to put in order to get out the types of deliverables, thinking, documents, information that we really need.
Yeah. How do companies empower employees to become these hyper generalists instead of fearing that AI is going to replace them?
I think part of it is about just baseline education. If you can demystify this space and help people understand what it is and also what it isn't, I think that that's helpful in getting folks on board. And then I think really having ongoing education, on the ground advocacy, and building community so that you have a community of folks within your organization or broader that are actually sharing how they're using it, how they're seeing value from it, sharing those individual use cases that spark ideas for others for, oh, I'd never thought of using it in that way, but I'm going to go and try this thing with my specific area of focus. So I think it's a number of components that kind of come together, but a lot of this can be built on the same frameworks as overall change management, right? Like that is the core of what we're talking about, is kind of an overhaul of the way that humans interface with technology writ large, and how do we then think about that at the organizational level?
Yeah. I'd love to share a little bit more about how you've done that within Southwest. You have been working on using AI to remove friction from the go-to-market process. Maybe you could help us understand that process. What was the problem that you ultimately set out to solve?
Yeah, so initially we actually didn't set out to solve one specific problem. So we are leveraging design thinking as the framework for approaching both challenges and opportunities to see if AI might be a fit in order to help solve those problems or take advantage of those opportunities. One of the things that I've noticed, and even in my consulting time, was that for many organizations, and especially I think middle management, AI has become a bit of a hammer looking for a nail. They've been told, go and do something with AI. We don't know what, but figure out something to do with AI. And as a result, you're seeing them try to apply AI to absolutely everything, which to me is a waste of time and resources, and there are ways to be much more strategic about it. For us, we are using design thinking as the overarching problem-solving framework, and part of that is really starting with understanding user needs. So before we make assumptions about what problem we're trying to solve, as we're looking at go-to-market, we were looking really at the end-to-end campaign process within our marketing team. And we wanted to understand more deeply where were those areas of friction, and then to really assess, given what we know about this area of friction, do we think that AI could be one of the ways we solve for the challenges they may be facing there and the pain points that we're seeing that are causing that friction. And we went through that process with a very large team, really trying to get as many viewpoints in the room as possible. We're able to uncover those pain points and document them, validate those through multiple workshops, through user interviews, and then come back to the table and actually start to conduct ideation sessions. So given the problems, how could we solve this specifically with AI? And before we moved into that, I guess I should say is that we did identify those specific areas where AI could be a solution by looking for what I really think about as signals for letting us know that this is an area that might be ripe for this particular type of technology.
What are some of those signals?
So the type of signals that we look for are, well, the first piece is we have to have data. We have to have existing data in this space in order specifically to build generative AI capabilities. Once we know we have data or even historic assets, so for example, on the marketing side, do we have existing marketing briefs? Do we have historic campaign creative that we could feed into the system, right? It doesn't have to be raw data. Once we identified places where we did have enough data, we then looked for any places within the process where there were repetitive tasks or actions, essentially things that are really being done the same way over and over and over again. We look at places where there's already templatization of a deliverable or an input item. So the campaign brief or maybe a reporting template, those again tell us there's something repeatable here that we could probably leverage AI to kind of do some of those repeatable rote tasks. And then we looked at places where we could pull functionality from other AI solutions that we built within the organization and repurpose for marketing's needs. So essentially low-hanging fruit where we already have the architecture, we already have the technical infrastructure, we're now just leveraging it in a different way, different use case, maybe different data inputs and a different format of an output. And then the last thing we looked at were places in the process where we see a high level of human error. So places where humans are copying and pasting, places where we consistently see, those spelling mistakes or grammatical errors, things like that are just, places where human error plays a role. And we think, again, AI could potentially be a solution for solving that, or at least alerting us when there is an error.
And that looking process, is that involve a bunch of interviews of various users along that process that you laid out? What are the inputs into that analysis that ultimately outputs maybe some sort of scoring across those signals?
Yeah, so we haven't come up with a scoring mechanism yet for those signals necessarily. We were really experimenting with this concept as a starting point for assessment. So we are going to be looking at how we mature that moving forward. But for this particular project, we did a number of one-on-one interviews and we did a number of workshops with stakeholders across multiple parts of the business. So everything from the actual members of the marketing team or representatives of the various functional marketing teams. So, social media, our actual paid media team, the brand team, the creative team, the strategy team, etc. We also included folks from the analytics team, folks from our digital team who actually run our website and web content, as well as the AIDT team. So we did have, and our technology teams as well. So we had kind of expertise in the room that was able to bring different perspectives to the table as we started to explore. Throughout that process, we also validated our findings with those same folks to make sure that we had actually captured things correctly, that we had understood things correctly, and really, in my mind, as you're moving forward on initiatives like this, the role of research is twofold. One is to get inputs so that you're actually developing the right solutions, focusing on the right problems, building the right capabilities into a product that you might be developing. The other piece is political. Research and including folks is a political tool of building advocacy, of getting people on board, of giving people a legitimate forum to express concerns, to bring their ideas to the table, and to be part of the process of understanding how we get to whatever the final solutions are. And we can't include everyone. We've got over 70,000 employees, right, at Southwest. But if we can include a subset, we can then also tap those people as on-the-ground advocates when those tools or new processes launch. And so I feel like research is one of the places I always see get cut, right? When companies are like, well, we don't really need to do a bunch of user research. We know what this product needs to do. We're going to go build it, do the user research. Like, it is very valuable in multiple ways. It's just probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you, especially as you're building in a new space, right? I think it's even more important to get some level of feedback and validation from people as you're building tools in a new space.
Yeah. I mean, it seems obvious that, like, if you're looking to design solutions to a problem or set of problems, or to identify the problems to ultimately build a solution for, that you want to talk to the people who have those problems, one, to better understand them, but then also two, so that when the solution is designed, they feel like they've gotten a solution to their problem, right? That's made their lives and their job easier. It seems common sense, but for some reason, we don't always do it.
Yeah, it's easy to want to skip over that, right? I think as a strategist, even I sometimes I'm like, we could solve this way, right? We want to jump straight to the solution instead of really understanding the real problem and then making sure that we're actually solving for the right thing. And that's a really important part of this process. Again, AI can be used in a multitude of ways, but deploying it strategically takes some real thinking, like some really deep thinking, and it takes research.
Yeah. What were the biggest takeaways from this process for you and Southwest?
I mean, I think it was validating for the marketing team to kind of, see some of the challenges that they've been experiencing on the ground really articulated in a way that the business can understand. I think that's part of the role of strategists, is kind of acting as a translator between and a bridge between what the business needs and what the user needs, and figuring out a way to bring those two things together into something that's, really works for both. But I think some of the biggest lessons have been that there is obviously some room for us to optimize, maybe some room for us to develop some new solutions that we haven't necessarily seen in the market, maybe some opportunities also to lean more on our existing partners. So we obviously have a number of vendors and tools and solutions that we use on the marketing side of the house. So how can we really work with them more strategically as new AI-powered capabilities come to play? I think for me, it has really helped to prove our process and has also given us some new kind of pieces to play with as we build out more of a repeatable framework. So those signals were not something I had like overtly thought about and codified or documented before this project. They were things I kind of knew in my head, like things to watch for. I think about all of the work I do as an opportunity to templatize, document, build things that are reusable, not just for myself, but for the team, for the organization. And so I love that we're leaving with some additional tools in our tool set as we approach new challenges, new problems, new areas of opportunity. We have a much more structured and mature way of looking at those, validating them, moving forward. And what I'm finding as I'm speaking to lots of other people in the market who are doing this at other brands is a lot of this just hasn't been documented. Like, there aren't a ton of best practices yet in this space. Like, it's part of what I love about it is the rules haven't been fully made yet. Like, we get to be part of that, and that's exciting.
Yeah. For people and companies that are struggling to integrate AI into their workflows, what's the first step they should take?
The first step I would take is I would understand how your workforce is currently using AI, because you may not think they're using AI in their day-to-day work, but I guarantee you at least a subset of them are. And I would get a sense of what are the real world use cases that are happening on the ground. Some of them may be within your governance rules, some may not. But they will give you a sense of where the need is in the organization. and they will start to help you justify the business case and maybe even build out some examples of workflows, right? It may be that you've got someone who's already figured out an entire automation flow for a process that, 100 other people are working on manually. Use the brain power you already have in your organization. Like I said, this use cases themselves are happening at the individual level. So leverage that, mine that, build community around that, like use that as a starting point because you already have those advocates on the ground, right? So the adoption of that process will likely be easier.
Yeah. And I guess related, what's the biggest misconception business leaders have about AI adoption?
That other brands have got it all figured out. And, that I think the other misconception is that the kind of primary value to expect is an efficiency metric, which I think just misses like an entire other side of the coin of this new technology, which is not we can do the same things faster, but we can do things we've never even imagined before. That is the part I'm most interested in. Like efficiency is great and it's a business value and we can connect ROI to it and it's important. I'm much more interested in what else can we do? What comes next? And that's much more interesting to me.
How do you explore what's possible with AI outside of how it can optimize a workflow? So let's maybe go back to the example that we discussed earlier. You're interviewing a bunch of stakeholders along sort of an existing set of processes. You're looking for replicable processes and pain points. How do you come at this, I guess, from a different angle, which is, that's great. We've identified steps. We can make these more efficient using AI, but that's also sort of optimizing the legacy way of doing things with a new technology. How do you come about it with looking to reinvent the way we serve that job be done or we get to that ultimate goal? How do you kind of balance those two approaches?
I don't know if we have like a really structured approach yet or that I have kind of put enough thinking around how we really drive truly innovative ideation around the space. I think it largely comes through experimentation. For me, that's where inspiration has always come from, working in emerging trends for over 20 years now and with emerging technologies. Part of it is looking outside of yourself and your industry. So what are other industries doing with this technology? What are individuals doing with this technology? So there's a number of essentially AI influencers that I follow on TikTok who spend their days experimenting with every new model, with every new tool. They have really interesting takes on where things are going. And even just the use cases that they play with start to spark my imagination, at least. So I think anytime you're working in a new space, being able to especially show leadership examples, even if they're not in your industry, of how this technology can be used, what those outcomes can look like, is one way to sort of start expanding thinking. The other thing is reading science fiction. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I'm a sci-fi fan, like love the genre. And I kind of feel like sci-fi has always been a genre that was really futurism, just packaged up as entertainment or as narrative. But it really does give us a sense of what's possible when we start to think outside of kind of our current, understanding of the world. So if you want to figure out where AI is going, go read some science fiction. Like it's all of those things, it's going there in all of those places, in all of those ways. Those are all possible.
Any recommendations?
I've been reading a really interesting series called Children of Time. There's 3 books in the series. It's deep space, aliens, terraforming planets, but there's a pretty robust AI component to the narrative as well. And I think it's a very interesting vision of how to think about AI, not necessarily as a mirror or replacement for humans, but as a wholly new species of intelligence that can mimic humans really well, but is also distinctly different from us. And I think that's kind of where we're heading.
Great. What a good place to end. Nicola, I really appreciate your time and coming by. Just curious.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.